History remembers Nero as the mad emperor who watched Rome burn. But long before the flames engulfed the city, a far more terrifying fire was burning inside the imperial palace. A fire fueled by paranoia, incestuous mind games, and a desperate race to commit the ultimate sin, matricide. Imagine sitting at a lavish banquet, raising a golden goblet to your lips, knowing that the son you birthed, the boy you clawed and murdered to put on the Roman throne, has just laced your wine with a fatal dose of poison. Agrippina the Younger knew. She felt the venom burning in her throat. But Nero didn't know her mother's deepest secret. She had spent years building an immunity, taking daily microdoses of antidotes. She swallowed the poison, looked her son dead in the eye, and smiled. This is the disturbing, twisted, and completely true story of how Rome's most ruthless mother pushed her son to the brink of madness until he was forced to build a mechanical death ship just to kill her. To understand why a son would want his mother dead, you have to understand who Agrippina was. She wasn't just a royal, she was a political apex predator. She had married the Emperor Claudius, her own uncle, and promptly convinced him to adopt her teenage son, Nero, making him next in line to the throne. Once the paperwork was signed, Claudius mysteriously died after eating a plate of poisoned mushrooms. At just 16 years old, Nero was handed the known world, but he didn't rule it. Agrippina did. In the early years, her control over him was absolute and deeply unsettling. She appeared on Roman coins alongside him, her face equal in stature to the emperor's. She demanded to sit beside him during official state meetings with foreign ambassadors. But behind closed doors, the control took a far more psychological, intimate turn. According to the Roman historians Suetonius and Tacitus, Agrippina used her own body as a weapon of political manipulation. Rumors suffocated the palace that she frequently slept in Nero's bed, using physical seduction to bend the young emperor to her absolute will. Whenever Nero tried to assert his independence or show interest in another woman, Agrippina would remind him exactly who made him king, using a terrifying blend of maternal authority and sensual control. But Nero was growing up, and the golden cage her mother built was turning into a psychological horror movie. He began to realize a fundamental truth about Roman politics. As long as Agrippina was alive, he was merely a puppet, and Nero wanted to play God.
The breaking point came when Nero fell in love with a noblewoman named Poppaea Sabina. Agrippina loathed her, realizing a new wife would break her hold over her son. She threatened Nero, hinting that she could easily find another claimant to the throne and replace him. That was her fatal mistake. Nero decided his mother had to die. But you couldn't just stab the most powerful woman in Rome in broad daylight. The public and the military loved her family lineage. It had to look natural. Nero turned to the dark arts of the Roman palace. Poison. 3 separate times, Nero arranged for untraceable, highly lethal toxins to be slipped into Agrippina's food and wine. But Agrippina was no fool. She knew exactly what her son was capable of. After all, she had taught him everything he knew. Anticipating his moves, she had been regularly consuming specialized antidotes, rendering Nero's lethal doses completely useless. Every time Nero expected a report of her sudden death, he instead received word that his mother was perfectly healthy, dining in her villa. The poison failed. The tension inside the palace was suffocating. Nero was growing desperate, his paranoia spiraling into full-blown madness. He needed a method of execution so elaborate, so foolproof, that even his invincible mother could not survive it. If you are gripping your seat right now, wondering how Nero escalates this twisted game of cat and mouse, hit that subscribe button right now. We drop deep dives into history's darkest psychological thrillers every single week, and you don't want to miss the madness coming up next. Drop a comment below. Do you think Nero is entirely to blame, or did Agrippina create the monster that destroyed her? Let me know, and let's get back to the assassination. Enter Anicetus, the commander of the fleet at Misenum and Nero's childhood tutor. He offered Nero a brilliant theatrical solution, a trick boat. A beautiful, luxurious yacht, engineered to look like a regal gift of reconciliation, but secretly designed to collapse at sea. Nero loved it. He invited Agrippina to a grand festival at bay, pretending he wanted to end their bitter feud. When she arrived, Nero showered her with affection, holding her close, kissing her eyes, and escorting her to the magnificent vessel anchored in the bay. It was a beautiful, starlit Mediterranean night. Agrippina boarded the ship, relaxing on a draped canopy near the stern. The ship set sail. Then, on a hidden signal, the trap snapped shut. The heavy lead-weighted ceiling above Agrippina's canopy suddenly collapsed, crushing her modern-day bodyguard to death instantly. But by a bizarre stroke of luck, the sturdy frame of Agrippina's bed shielded her from the impact. Chaos erupted. The engineered mechanism to split the ship in half failed because the crew members who weren't in on the plot started fighting to save the vessel. Realizing the clock was ticking, the conspirators among the crew ran to one side of the boat to capsize it manually. Agrippina, realizing instantly that this was no accident, threw herself into the dark, cold sea. As she swam through the black water, she looked back and saw one of her maids who was screaming for help, yelling, "I am Agrippina! Save the emperor's mother!" The crew members, thinking it was indeed the empress, immediately beat the maid to death with oars. Agrippina kept silent, swam through the shadows, and was picked up by a small fishing boat. She had survived the poison, she had survived the collapsing ship, and she had survived the executioners in the water.
When Nero received the news that his mother was alive and resting at her lakeside villa, he completely broke down. He wept openly, screaming that she would come to Rome to slaughter him in his sleep. The psychological warfare had broken the emperor. There was no more time for clever traps or hidden poisons. Nero ordered a troop of armed soldiers, led by Anicetus, to march directly to her villa. The soldiers kicked down the doors, terrifying her servants, and surrounded Agrippina in her dimly lit bedroom. She looked up at the men, seeing her former ally Anicetus drawing his sword. She knew there was no escape. She knew her son had sent them. But Agrippina, defiant until her final breath, did not beg for mercy. Instead, she stood up, bared her torso to the assassins, and uttered one of the most chilling final phrases in ancient history. She looked at the blades and commanded, "Strike my belly, smite the womb that bore Nero." They fell upon her, stabbing her repeatedly until she lay dead on the bedroom floor. Nero got what he wanted. He was finally free of his mother's shadow, but the ghost of Agrippina would haunt him for the rest of his life. Historians write that he was tortured by nightmares of his mother, chasing him with whips and burning torches, driving him deeper into the erratic madness that eventually forced him to commit suicide a decade later. Agrippina had built a tyrant, and in the end, that tyrant consumed them both. If this story proved that real history is wilder than any fiction, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Click the video on your screen right now to dive into another shocking tale of madness from the ancient world. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when history comes alive. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.